5 cards that broke Hearthstone's rules, creating gameplay that you will otherwise never see. Up first, we have Valdris Fellgorge, which is a legendary warlock minion from the Descent of Dragons set. Battlecry, increase your maximum hand size to 12. Draw 4 cards. In Hearthstone, you are, in a normal game, always limited to a maximum hand size of 10 cards. If you have more than 10 cards and you draw a card, you burn that card.
We overdraw 1 card if we select. I'm doing it. As long as it's not Godfrey. Or Rafam. That's, oh my god, that was literally the one thing I didn't want to overdraw. It was Rafam, and it was the 1 card.
That is a key premise of managing your resources and kind of knowing when to play cards out of your hand, when to draw cards to make sure you don't overdraw. And then sometimes there are strategies your opponent will do. They try to make you draw too many cards, so you overdraw and you lose value and your cards evaporate into the ether essentially. And so anyone who's played Hearthstone for any amount of time will know you are limited to 10 cards in your hand. That is a fundamental rule of Hearthstone. However, with this card, you are broken free of that constraint to achieve Big Hand. This is a card that just straight up takes what we've always known, take what everyone has in every game of Hearthstone, and just breaks it. Just says, you know what? Nah, let's not do 10. Let's do 12 instead. And just completely throws out the fundamentals that we have in the game. This Battlecry effect is the first time a card is able to increase the maximum hand size of 10. And to this day, it is still one of only 2 cards that actually lets you increase your maximum hand size. The other being Audio Amplifier, which we'll get to more later. This card doesn't really have like a specific deck that it's known for. It's just one of those cards that's just like a general card that does a thing. Like, you could play Handlock, sure, like that seems like the most obvious reason to include a card like this, is to be able to have a bigger hand, to be able to summon a bigger taunt with a card like Dark Alley Pact, or play a cheaper Mountain Giant. But otherwise, it's just kind of a card that you would play in just whatever the control warlock deck of the current time was, and that's kind of what you did with it. The problem with a card like this is you're increasing value in a place where you already have so much for free, right? You invest no resources, you invest no time, you invest no mana, you invest nothing, and you are given 10 free hand slots. So paying for a 7 mana 4/4 just to be able to get 2 more hand slots, most of the time doing nothing, and when it does do something, it's just really not that impactful. Not to mention, most games, unless you're actually going to fatigue, burning a card is essentially just putting it on the bottom of your deck. The game will end, you'll just have never seen the card. It'll just maybe feel worse. And in the games you do get to fatigue, obviously that matters, but with a card like this, you're also drawing 4 cards, which one is the primary upside. It's kind of like sprint on a stick, but also it's like fighting against itself in the downside, where like if you're going to lose cards and get to fatigue, this is going to help you get to fatigue. So it's like, sure, you keep a couple of your cards around in this massive hand of yours, but power level wise, not really worth the investment, not really worth the time. You could, outside of something like a typical control warrior deck, you could do what Mark is doing here and just do the silliest thing you can think of, which involves a combo that literally requires 10 or more cards and then kill your opponent that way just to show off the card. I mean, that, hey, more power to him, I guess. But yeah, that is Valdris Fellgorge, a card that broke the constraints of the hand size. It broke a core rule in Hearthstone, and that is why it is featured in this video. This next card breaks you free from the inevitability of running out of cards in your deck and having to take fatigue damage. However, in this case, we are more focused on the fact that it prevents you from running out of cards, as there are a few cards that prevent you from taking fatigue damage. Not to mention just like having your hero be immune. This fundamentally makes it so you can never draw a card and then not draw a card and get fatigue damage. You just will always draw something. The card we're talking about next is Kill Jaden, which is a legendary neutral minion from the Great Dark Beyond set. This card is the ultimate late game value engine. Battlecry. Replace your deck with an endless portal of demons. Each turn, they gain an additional +2 attack and +2 health. The way this card works is pretty simple. When Kill Jaden is played, the player's deck is removed. It's not destroyed, so destroy cards like Furnace Fuel don't trigger. Then the player's deck gets replaced with a green portal with some black in it, just, you know, constantly moving, nice animation. And then for the rest of the game, anytime the player draws a card from any action, whether it be start of turn, a draw card, etc., they draw a random demon from the portal. The demons can be from any class or neutral, and then at the end of the turn, and at the end of the player's turn, all future each your demons drawn get an additional +2/+2. So if your first demon drawn, for example, is a 1 mana 1/3, it would instead be a 1 mana 3/5. And then your next turn, if you were to draw something like Void Lord, a 9 mana 3/9, it would now be +4/+4 and be a 9 mana 7/13. And that continues to grow an additional 2/2 on the original buff. So 3 turns afterward, you're getting +6/+6 on the random demon. Then you're getting +8/+8 on the next random demon you draw, +10/+10. If you draw like multiple in the same turn, they're going to have the same buff, but different turns, like your manual draw is going to have an additional +2/+2 every time, which is crazy. There are some interesting, really fringe cases that like this technically could be different than as advertised. Like the portal is endless, so the player can't receive normal fatigue damage for the rest of the game. But if they were to draw more than 30 cards at once, they actually could, because it only like refills 30 random cards every time. So if you made them draw 100 cards in one action, I do believe they would die to fatigue, depending on if they had like 1,000 health, right? Well, I mean, in that case, they'd have to have like hundreds of thousands of health. But anyway, because it's a portal that constantly gets refreshed with random demons, also if you shuffle stuff in, those get completely removed. Mechanics like Dredge or Lore Keeper Polkelt, which sort your deck, will work, but they'll only work once, right? So if you Dredge, you can move one demon to the top, but once it's drawn, the whole deck gets reshuffled and you get a random 30 demons again, right? The same happens with Polkelt. You'll shuffle it, put the top most expensive one on top, but as soon as you draw it, it'll all reshuffle back up to 30 random demons again, and so the effects go away. Also worth noting, Fanatum Lord of the Opera is gonna not be reduced because you don't actually have an empty deck. You have a full deck of 30 random demons. Chef Nome also won't work because you don't have an empty deck. You have a deck full of random demons. You just don't see them because it's a portal. A portal to something. This is just like one of the craziest cards we've ever seen in Hearthstone. It completely breaks the notion, the mechanic, the constraint of having a deck that you brought in and having to draw a card from that deck or take fatigue damage. Instead, you just have an endless portal of random demons. It's very, you know, technology pilled, right? You could never do that in a physical card game, and so they're using the space that the physical could not utilize in the digital by saying, hey, I can throw random demons in here and you can draw them and we can buff them, and it's pretty cool. This card, it leads you to have some incredibly complicated and large board states like you're seeing here from day 9. I think if you showed a classic player this board state, they might pass out. This is just continual value of just huge minion after huge minion, absurd amounts of power and value from both sides we're seeing in this game. It's just a never-ending portal until eventually someone's going to take a bunch of damage from some of these minions and actually end up losing. Most decks either have this in there or have this in their ETC so that they can find it when they need it. And so most control decks, anything like a slower strategy, probably has a way to get to this if they want it. And so the games are just never going to end by, oh, he died of fatigue. It's like you're always going to have to earn your win, and it's going to be a long, long battle to get there sometimes, unless you happen to get lucky and connect right away. But your opponent's going to have a lot of the same stuff you do, and so it's going to be a big back and forth. It's one of the coolest cards that exists in the game, and it's like one of those cards where if you just haven't ever played it, you haven't played Hearthstone in a while, you should maybe come experience it, because it's like almost a new state of gameplay that you're in, where like your goal is no longer to like do anything other than live and clear their board so you can continue to flood out bigger and bigger and bigger demons, kind of like old Jade Golems, bigger and bigger green men, but instead now it's mostly purple men and women and other things with the demon tag, imps of the natures of the world, right? I think that about sums up Kill Jaden. It breaks you free from the inevitability of running out of cards in your deck and just turns you into a super value powerhouse. Next up, we have Wild Heart Guff, a legendary druid hero card from the Fractured and Alterac Valley set. 5 mana, 5 armor, battle cry, set your maximum mana to 20. Gain an empty mana crystal, draw a card. Additionally, the hero power Nurture says choose one, draw a card, or gain an empty mana crystal, meaning that after playing Wild Heart Guff, you have the option to cast Wild Growth or to draw a card every turn using your hero power, which is way stronger than gaining an armor and 1 attack. Wild Heart Guff and this hero power combined super well, and it lets you become an incredibly powerful class and just hero and deck because you're able to do extremely powerful things, merging multiple 10 plus cost cards in a turn, or multiple 8 plus cost cards in a turn, or playing like 4 cards all comboed together, right? Because you have up to 20 maximum mana. You are a late game powerhouse. You can ramp with that hero power every turn to get up there faster, and and you just over time get ahead of your opponent because you have so much more mana available to you. This was the first card in the game that lets you break outside of the normal 10 mana constraints. Anyone who's played Hearthstone a lot knows that you start the game with 1 mana crystal, and then every turn you get that mana crystal back plus gain 1. So you go from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, but you have a cap of 10. So when you go from 9 to 10, on turn 11, you still just have 10 mana crystals at the start of your turn. When Wildheart Guff came out, they broke that rule by intentionally designing it to allow that card and that card only at the time to go outside of that 10 mana constraint, which is what enabled you to become a late game powerhouse because you could build your deck around that. The other cards nowadays that let you also do similar effects are Audio Amplifier, which is another card like Valdris that lets you increase your maximum hand size. It actually does both maximum hand size and maximum mana. We have the new Ysera card that came out, Ysera Emerald Aspect, which increases both players' maximum mana by 5 at the start of the game, which is pretty cool. You also have New Heights, which is a ramp spell for Druid that increases your maximum mana by 3. Those we don't really need to get into though. Those came after Guff, and they only exist because Guff was successfully designed to break Hearthstone's rules. The next card that breaks the rules of Hearthstone is Ziliax Deluxe 3000. Ziliax Deluxe 3000 is a legendary neutral minion card from the Whizbang's Workshop set. It is a card that consists of 8 modules that can be paired up with one another to create many different versions of Ziliax Deluxe 3000. When building your deck, Ziliax will feature an extra button beneath his card slot in the deck titled Customize. When you click that button, you see your module options. You pick 2 of them, and that is the card that you then put into your deck. Simply put, this breaks free from the rules of being a card, like a minion with text and mana cost and attack and health. This is just not that. This is not a Hearthstone card in the way that any other Hearthstone card is. This is a Lego set that you can make into a Hearthstone card. You get to build your own card, so long as you use one of the 8 modules they have provided. And you have to pick different modules. You can't pick the same one more than once. You must pick exactly 2 different ones. And you can actually also choose which of the 2 arts from the 2 modules that you picked is the art that is shown on the card by dragging it into the bottom right. Obviously, with like anything in Hearthstone, the players are going to figure out like what combinations of modules are the best, and you're going to end up just playing like 2 to 3 of them, whichever number of them are good for specific decks and good enough generally. But this card turned out to be good enough generally in a lot of different ways, as it is actually now the most nerfed Hearthstone card ever, which I suppose makes sense because this card breaks the rules of Hearthstone by being more than one card. So every time that like, hey, that combination of Ziliax is a problem, let's nerf that module. If there's more problems, they nerf another module, and all these nerfs count as a nerf to Ziliax Deluxe 3000, which makes him the most nerfed Hearthstone card ever, with something like 10 nerfs or 10 changes. They've done some reverts in there as well. It's crazy. If you want to see it all, go to the wiki, search it up, and just look at the card changes at the bottom. There are a ton of card changes. Some of the most popular ways to play this card were to play it in aggro, like I said, to make your minions have +1 attack, or formerly +1 attack and +1 health. And it also used to cost less for enemy minions as well as your own, so you were pretty often playing a 0 mana 3/5 that would buff your board similar to a raid leader. Very good in wide board decks, obviously. You'd also see it with decks that use things like Hydration Station, which would bring back taunt minions. So you'd pick the one that was a 4/6 with Divine Shield, Taunt, Poisonous, Reborn. And so when they'd kill it off, they'd reborn, they'd kill it off again. You'd have 2 of them in your res pool. You'd then be able to play Hydration Station, get a bunch of them back, and just kind of keep making huge walls of taunt with Poisonous, Divine Shield, taunted minions. As you can see, there's many different ways to play this one card, and many of them were really good ways to play this card. And it's not terribly surprising because this is a whole lot more than one card. So the odds that it was going to like be usable was much higher. That's the story of Ziliax breaking the rules of the game by being different and unlike any other minion that we've ever seen. Last, but certainly not least, on our list of 5 cards that broke the rules of Hearthstone is Prince Renathal. 3 mana, 3 attack, 4 health. Your deck size and starting health are 40. Prince Renathal is a legendary neutral minion card from the Murder at Castle Nathria set, and while Prince Renathal is included in your deck, the deck screen will change, and you will, instead of needing to put 30 cards in, you will need to put 40 in. The 40 health effect will take place at the start of a game, similar to how Baku the Moon Eater used to trigger your hero power at the start of the game, or Prince Malchezaar would shuffle in minions at the start of a game, etc. This card breaks the rules of Hearthstone in two ways. Both I think are very obvious because it's all the cards do. A Hearthstone deck consists of 30 cards. A Hearthstone deck has consisted of 30 cards since the game came out in 2014 and has always consisted of 30 cards. There are side modes where you do dungeon run and you have a smaller deck, and duels where you have a 15 size card deck. But in constructed Hearthstone, you have always had 30 health and 30 cards. Until Prince Renathal showed up and broke both of those rules by increasing your starting health above 30 and your deck size above 30. This is just as simple as it gets to just blatantly and obviously and intentionally breaking the rules of Hearthstone. It is completely changing what Hearthstone is and how it was, and morphing in an entirely new way to play the game, an entirely different type of deck, an entirely different life total on your hero. There's not a lot to show here. I mean, it's like a 3-mana 3/4 without text once you're in the game. It's like a spider tank without a tribe. It triggers at the start of the game, gives you 10 health, you have 10 more cards, and a lot of the community, especially content creators, have loved this card because it allowed you to have more health, to be able to survive longer, to be able to play more cards, and in, their words, do memeier things, because you wouldn't just die right away. You'd be able to try out new cards, do fun things that maybe necessarily weren't the most competitive, and just generally it slowed down the game a lot, which allowed you to play more different cards in your deck, obviously, but also just more different cards in the meta overall, because games weren't as limited by how fast of a clock aggro could put on you as much as they were before, and you now had like more tech card options you could maybe like slot in if you wanted to try to like tech for certain combo decks, and so it just generally slowed the meta down a lot. But realistically, all that matters is the health aspect of that more than the deck size. I think Prince Renathal is like the clearest, most obvious example for a card that belongs on this list. This like blew everyone's mind when they saw it for the first time. We couldn't have like ever thought that like one day we were going to start with more health than 30. Like we've had cards like the Ungoro Priest Reward Amara that would set your hero's health to 40, but actually starting with more than 30 health, as well as having a deck size above 30, is crazy to think about. I can't wait for the day personally where we get to have a card like this that makes my deck size 20 and my health 20. However, they're never going to do that because that would be like the most busted card I think to ever touch the game, because while 20 health is really low, you're going to have a well enough refined combo deck that like it just doesn't matter. At least in Wild. In Standard they can like be really careful to like make sure that just like doesn't happen, but then it's like, what are you really getting out of the fun experience? Which that's another reason why it won't exist, probably the other way. But certainly a very popular card, somewhat polarizing for people who didn't like it. But when you have a card like any of these on this list that break the fundamental rules of Hearthstone, you're bound to find somebody upset at them if they're at least somewhat powerful, right? Of this list, I think Valdris is probably the only card on here that no one is upset about because it was just competitively very weak, right? It was giving someone an upside that really didn't bother the opponent. It really didn't like give them an unfair advantage that was like unrecoverable from. Where like a Guff on 5 could just like win the game on its own. Renathal drastically changes the matchup if they have it or not, based on the cards in their deck, based on the amount of health you have to deal to them. Kill Jaden makes it entirely impossible for you to ever run them out of resources and kind of get ahead to then be able to give the finishing blow. They're just going to always have stuff to keep coming back with, and so it's going to be a lot harder for you to win that way. And then Ziliax Deluxe 3000 is just like a really good card in like 8 different versions. I mean, more realistically like 4, but you get the point. Cards that break the rules, break the game of Hearthstone, not just in a power level standpoint, but from literally the constraints that are the game, are both really cool, really fascinating, potentially loved, hated as a result. But I'm excited personally to see what cards we'll see in the future that break other rules of Hearthstone. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already subscribed, you should. A very small number of people that watch my videos are actually subscribed. You could always just like not do it, but it'd make me happy if you did do it. So please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.